Hello, everyone. Everything's Cheryllee, back with another video. Glad you can join me, glad to see you, glad you can be here. Just want to just have a few things today that I want to talk about. Usually I talk about something pertaining to law, business, accounting, information systems. So, um, so dealing what I do is I write children's books and also have other products that I am marketing. I'll be building my website shortly. My children's books are in the Google Play Store and the ebooks. So I want to branch off from children's books to some books on, different topics like relationships for adults. And I want to venture out in some other topics, maybe something like, I don't know. I know relationships is on the top of my list. So how does a man choose a good woman? There might be a title. How does a woman choose a good man? How to win with how to win in dating and relationships, something like that. Just some topics that I wanted to throw out there. So I usually talk about business, law, accounting, information systems. So in other words, you're running a business, you start a business, you want to be able to market to a particular group. Your target market, a particular group, a particular age group, whatever particular size or whatever group you want to market to. So target market. So why can't you have more than one target market? So I believe you can. We should be able to market to more than one target market. Say for instance we have a target market over here 18 to 30-year-olds, and we may market to 35 to 60 years olds or something like that, but so marketing, advertising, promoting, target markets, marketing channels, competitive advantage. When I'll compete with competitors, then I introduce a few other terms: total quality management, continuous improvement. But I'm not going to talk about too much of that. Too much. I'm not going to talk about those terms today. I was just mentioning them. I might just say a few things, but total quality management when you total quality management, when you get all the people in the organization, they are gathered together, they work together rather. They work together to approve all the processes and all the departments across the whole organization. So that's what it means when they say total quality. You want quality in every department, in every area of your business. So that would trickle down to your products and your services and your customers and your employees. So what I learned in school, in class, rather when I was, in class, taking classes at Strayer University right here in Washington, D.C., I learned that, because I did a report, we had to do a report. I did a report on Southwest Airlines. So Southwest Airlines, what they do, they usually say, in the business world, they usually say marketing. I was in the marketing arena, marketing area, marketing. I guess I would say, in your marketing niche or out there in the marketing world, they usually say that customers are number one. But when I did my report, the customers should be number one. But when I did my report on Southwest Airlines, they said employees are number one. You know why? Because Employees are the ones who have the first access to your customers. So if you have employees and they are beat down, working under, I would say, hazardous working conditions, a hostile working environment, just, everything, and you beat them down, managers beating them down, so they being beat down on the job by somebody. They're not getting paid right, they're proper wages, and then talk to any kind of way. The working environment for them is just poor. And then, how do you think they're going to feel when the customers come in? They're going to be so drained and beat down mentally as well that when the customers come in, they're going to take it out on the customer. So that's why Southwest Airlines, I don't know if they still have their policy, but I know when I was taking my courses at Australian University, that was in the beginning of the beginning of 2000. So that was some time ago, and this is 2021. So they employees, you have to treat them respectfully. You have to pay them the right wages. Can't beat them down, make them work under all hazardous working conditions, hostile working environment. Managers, not treating them with that love and respect and that they deserve. And then, so mentally, eventually it would begin to get to them. And then when the customers come in, they're going to pass their feelings and their harsh feelings down on the customer. And how do you think that's going to make the product? That's going to hurt your product, and your services, your profits. So that will hurt everything about your business, about your brand. So you're trying to build a brand. You're trying to build your brand and constantly, continuously improve certain things, about your brand. You're not trying to tear your brand down. But I have a few gentlemen that I wanted to just make you aware of, I guess. Few gentlemen that I want to just make you aware of. So these are some of the gentlemen that I learned about when I was in school, State University, Washington D.C. So first gentleman, Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci, he painted the Last Supper. So they said that was the last time that they saw Jesus Christ, when they painted, when they had, when he was at the Last Supper, and then Leonardo da Vinci painted the Last Supper. So that was let me see, let me show you a picture of it. I hope they don't get me in trouble for showing the picture in the book. So we had another gentleman named Jacopo Tintoretto. He painted the Last Supper as well, but it was an oil on candy. But Leonardo da Vinci, he painted the Last Supper, and they had hit 1485 to 1498. So it's a picture of the Last Supper. At the Last Supper. So let me see the one at the top. The one at the top is a little different. The one at the top is Jacopo Tintoretto, the Last Supper, and he painted it in Florence. The first one has been painted in Florence. And so Leonardo da Vinci, he painted his in New York. It says his was painted in New York. Leonardo da Vinci right here at the bottom one. So Leonardo da Vinci. So then we have another gentleman, Michelangelo. Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel. And also right here he painted the St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. So that's on page, let me see, that's page 18. So, St. Peter's Basilica and the Vatican, Rome. And the dome was painted by Michelangelo, 1547, 1564. So Michelangelo painted the dome. So that's beautiful, ain't it? Isn't it beautiful? My teacher never liked us to say ain't or got, so I would say isn't that beautiful? So Michelangelo painted the dome on his building, the Basilica. It's the Basilica, St. Peter's Basilica, and the Vatican, and that was in Rome. That was in Rome. So that's Michelangelo. And then we have so just a few gentlemen I want to touch base on. Another gentleman, John Locke. John Locke was an English philosopher. He was an English philosopher and physician. So, English philosopher and physician. Okay, so the writings of the English philosopher and physician John Locke, 1632 to 1704, firmly defended the empirical tradition in 17th century thought and provided a clearly reasoned basis for centuries and philosophic debate. Written 70 years after Bacon's Novum Organum, Locke's essays concerning human understanding in 1690 confirmed his predecessor's thesis that everything one knows derives from sensory experience. According to Locke, the human mind at birth is a tabula rasa, a blank slate. So according to John Locke, when we were born, our mind is considered a blank slate. In other words, I guess, as we go on throughout our lives, we begin to learn things and we begin to fill our brain with different things. Almost like, they say the brain is like a computer, but, it says, according to Locke, the human mind at birth is a blank slate, upon which experience consisting of experience, all our experiences that we encounter over the years as we grow, get older. You grow from infant to toddler to a teenager to adult, adulthood. Upon which experience consisting of sensations, followed by reflection, writes the script. No innate moral principles or ideas exist, rather human knowledge consists of the progressive accumulation of the evidence of the senses. The implications of Locke's principles of knowledge strongly affected European and American thought and helped to shape an optimistic view of human destiny. For experience influences human knowledge and behavior. So in other words, your experiences that you encounter throughout your life, it says the experience influences human knowledge and behavior. So the experiences that you encounter will determine your behavior. Because that's true to me. See, if it says if experience influences human knowledge and behavior, which I think it does, argue the empiricists, then surely improving the social environment will work to perfect the human condition. Yeah, you can try to improve the social environment. That would be good. So it's just like you grew up in an environment, you grew up in the projects, and there's a lot of shooting and bad things going on, a lot of crime, and you experiencing that type of thing, then that will have a lot to do. That will have something to do with your behavior. But I'm saying, I guess it would, but I've been around all that type of stuff, around in neighborhoods that I've lived in, but I try to be strong and know that, that is, I figure to me, that is out there and not nothing that I have to participate in, or nor do I need to participate in something like that. So I built my life around the things that I wanted to do. So when there's negativity out there, I let it stay out there. It says Locke's ideas became basic to 18th century liberalism, as well as to all political ideologies that held that human knowledge, if properly applied, would produce happiness for humankind. And that's true. So that's John Locke. He says that if properly, it says, if properly applied, will produce happiness for humankind. Locke's ideas became basic to the 18th century liberalism, as well as to all political ideologies. Human knowledge, if properly applied. So in other words, if you apply human knowledge properly, it can basically make you happy, is what he's saying. It can make happiness for humankind. So that's cool. That sounds good to me. So let's talk about another gentleman, Sir Isaac Newton, 1642 to 1727. Sir Isaac Newton. So let's see. I know he was a mathematician.
That's right, boy. Let's go.
Okay. Let's see. Page 50. Sir Isaac Newton. Newton's scientific synthesis. The work of the great English astronomer and mathematician Isaac Newton, 1642 to 1727. Some of these gentlemen, you feel like you want to do more research on, you can do more research. John Locke, Sir Isaac Newton, and a couple other people I'll be talking about, Socrates, Plato. There's so many of them, Descartes, and I have another gentleman I'm going to talk about probably shortly, Thoureau, or Walden Pond. It said the work of the great English astronomer and mathematician Isaac Newton, 1642, 1727, represents a practical synthesis of 17th century physics and mathematics and the union of the inductive and deductive methods. Newton advanced the new science from its speculative and empirical phases, represented by Copernicus and Galileo. Galileo invented the telescope, respectively, to the stage of codification. He brought Kepler's laws of celestial mechanics and Galileo's terrestrial law of falling bodies into an all-embracing theory of universal gravitation that describes every physical movement in the universe. Yeah, Galileo discovered the telescope. He let the objects fall. I guess he wanted to test gravity. So it says gravitation. Yep, he said mechanics. Galileo's terrestrial law of falling bodies into an all-embracing theory of universal gravitation that describes every physical movement in the universe, from the operation of ideas to the effects of a planet upon its moon. In 1687, Newton published his monumental treatise on the laws of motion. Let me show this. Let's show the TV next to that. Yes. Okay, so let's finish reading up on Sir Isaac Newton. Well, I call him Sir Isaac Newton, but just call him Isaac Newton. Okay, in 1687, Newton published his monumental treatise. Okay, and then it says Newton's Principia, the fundamentals of which went unchallenged until the late 19th century, promoted the idea of a uniform and intelligible universe. that operated as systematically as a well-oiled machine. Newton not only desanctified nature, he proved that nature's laws applied equally to terrestrial and celestial matter. Moreover, Newton showed that by means of mathematical analysis and scientific observation, enlightened individuals might comprehend and control their world more completely than had ever before been possible. So Newton showed that by means of mathematical analysis and scientific observation. Mathematical analysis, scientific observation. I was never too good at science. Enlightened individuals might comprehend and control their world more completely than had ever before been possible. So in other words, he's saying that he showed that Newton showed that by means of mathematical analysis. So in other words, mathematical analysis, scientific observation. So scientific observation, you may be observing experiments. We did experiments and stuff like that in science, but science didn't, But I think I took biology and I took a regular science course. So if you're observing things, you observing maybe even algebra problems, because it's saying mathematical analysis. If you're observing mathematical analysis, scientific observation, it says that maybe that would enlighten you to be able to comprehend. Comprehend means to understand and control the world. Understand the world more completely than had ever been possible. So you looking at experiments, you looking at mathematical analysis, looking at experiments, science experiments. So he's saying that if you may be able to understand the world more completely than you had ever before. I mean, it sounds logical to me. Okay, so that was Isaac Newton, the famous mathematician. So now we have, it's a whole lot of them on here, but I'm not going to read all of them. Okay, let's talk about, let's see what Michelangelo. If Michelangelo comes up again. So Michelangelo, he was also a famous painter. Michelangelo, let me see what they're saying about him. Okay, Michelangelo. Okay, it says, the manner of his style is already evident in the Last Judgment that the 60-year-old Michelangelo painted. So Michelangelo painted the Last Judgment. Here's a picture right here. Famous painter Michelangelo. That's the Last Judgment. So I did take art as well, but I took art in like the 10th. I think I took art in the 10th grade, but I did pretty good because we used to paint. We used to have to paint the still life. We painted still life, but I did pretty good in art. But I think I got a C in that. So it says, okay, the manner of the style is already evident in the Last Judgment, painted by Michelangelo. He was 60 years old at the time, and he painted it on the wall of the Sistine Chapel between 1534 and 1541, only a few years after the armies of the Holy Roman Empire had sacked the city of Rome. Michelangelo returned to the chapel whose ceiling he had painted some 20 years earlier. So he painted this Last Judgment, and then 20 years earlier, he painted. He returned to the chapel, the Sistine Chapel, and painted. It says he returns 20 years earlier. So he returned to the chapel he had painted some 20 years earlier with the optimistic vision of salvation. Now in a mood of brooding pessimism, The aging genius filled the altar wall with agonized, writhing figures that pressed dramatically against one another. Surrounding the wrathful Christ are the Christian martyrs who carry the instruments of their torture, and throngs of the resurrected, originally depicted nude, but later, in the wake of Catholic reform, draped to hide their. So that was Michael and Michael. Well, no, that was Michael. It do say Michelangelo. So Michelangelo painted on the east side wall of the Sistine Chapel. But over here it says yes, yeah, do say Michelangelo. All right, Michelangelo. Okay. So, let's see who we have. Then we have the King James Version of the Holy Bible, 1611 publication, King James Version of the Holy Bible. And let me see, that's page, you got that on page 9. King James Version of the Holy Bible. That's not page 9. Let's see. 103. Okay, I got the pages wrong on that, but I had to go back to that one now. I had the right page of that. Okay, let's talk about another gentleman, John Sebastian Bach. He was an organ and master choir director of the Lutheran Church of St. Thomas in Leipzig. So let's see what they're saying about him. John Sebastian Bach. John Sebastian Bach. And this is a picture of that's John Sebastian Bach. John Sebastian Bach. So they had, he almost looked like Thomas Jefferson, don't he? Thomas Jefferson was the first person to sign the Declaration of Independence. So let's talk about John Sebastian Bach. He was born, so Bach and religious music. He was born, John Sebastian Bach was born in the small town of Isac, very near the castle in which Martin Luther, hiding from the wrath of the Roman papacy, had first translated the Bible into German, unlike the cosmopolitan Handel. Bach never strayed more than a couple of 100 miles from his birthplace, nor did he depart from his Protestant roots. Luther's teachings and Lutheran hymn tunes were Bach's major sources of religious inspiration, and the organ, the principal instrument of Protestant church music, was one of his favorite instruments. The Germans were the masters of the organ, and Bach was acknowledged to be the finest of organ virtuoso. When I say virtuosi. He even served as a consultant in the construction of Baroque organs, whose ornately embellished casings made them the glory of many Protestant churches. As organ master and choir director of the Lutheran Church of St. Thomas in Leipzig, Bach assumed the responsibility of composing music for each of the Sunday services and for holidays. A pious Lutheran and the father of 20 children. Father of 20 children from 2 marriages. Wow, that's something else. And the father of 20 children from 2 marriages, 5 of whom became notable musicians. Bach humbly dedicated his composition to the glory of God. Bach's religious vocal music included such forms as the oratorio, the mass, and the cantata. The cantata is a multi-movement work sung in verse by chorus and soloist and accompanied by a musical instrument or instruments with S on it. Like the oratorio, cantata may be sacred or secular in subject matter and lyric or dramatic in style. Bach composed cantatas as musical commentaries on the daily scriptural lessons of the Lutheran church service. So that's Bach right there. John Sebastian Bach. I showed you a picture. So who do we have? Let's see. I talked about Galileo and the telescope. We have King Louis the 14th. He governed France, and he talks about him as a direct representative of God on earth. So he was very religious, I guess. So King Louis the 14th. Let's see what they're saying for him. King Louis, portrait of Louis the 14th. So this Louis the 14th right here. Say Louis the 14th. A closer look. Louis the 14th. So they had a very distinct wardrobe, you know. Almost looked like that looked like a blanket that he had over him. So we had, so I said Louis the 14th. So Louis the 14th, 1638 to 1715. Governed France he governed France as the direct representative of God on earth. Neither the church nor the nobility nor the will of his subjects limited his power. During his 72 years on the throne, wow, he was 72 years on the throne. He served 72 years on the throne. The Estates General, France's representative assembly, was never once called into session. As absolute monarch, Louis brought France to a position of political and military preeminence among the European nation states. Okay, that's Louis the 14th. He governed France. So now let's go on to two more gentlemen, Hobbes and Locke, 1588 to 1679. So Hobbes and Locke. So let's see what they say about Hobbes and Locke. So the political theories of Hobbes and Locke. It says Thomas Hobbes, so you can always look up these gentlemen, find out more about them. You got Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. Thomas Hobbes, 1588, 1679. And John Locke, so both of them were the same year, 1588 to 1679. The latter of whom we met in chapter 22, talked about John Locke in chapter 22. Hobbes and Locke, they took up the urgent question of human rights versus the sovereignty of the ruler. Human rights versus the sovereignty of the ruler. So the ruler is the king. I guess the ruler would be the king or the queen, but I guess in this instance it would be the king. So it said Hobbes and Locke took up the urgent question of human rights versus the sovereignty. So in other words, he was probably questioning how people were being treated. And your rights, human rights. Like back in slavery days, slaves didn't have any rights. They took their rights away. They couldn't work. I mean, they worked, but they worked for free. They couldn't work on jobs where they could file taxes, so they had no human rights. So a lot of these people in our past fought for a lot of those things, human rights, a lot of different things. So, but, so it says they fought for human rights and human rights versus the sovereignty of the ruler. So obviously, maybe the king had I guess he had a different opinion about human rights than John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. Shaken by the conflict between royalists and anti-royalists, factions that had fueled the English Civil War, both thinkers rejected the principle of divine right monarchy. Monarchy is, I guess, at the time that he served as the king of England or the king of France. Instead, they advanced the idea that government must be based in social contract. For Hobbes, the social contract was a covenant among individuals who willingly surrendered a portion of their freedom to a governing authority or ruler, in whose hands should rest ultimate authority. So a social contract. That's what Hobbes believed, Thomas Hobbes. And a social contract was a covenant. So basically a social contract is an agreement. You know what a contract is? We sign contracts all the time. Like you rent an apartment, you sign a contract. You buy a house, you buy a car, you sign a contract. So he's saying that instead they advance the idea that government must be based in a social contract. So that's Thomas Hobbes. Individuals who willingly surrender a portion of their freedom. So if you surrender, I guess he was saying if you surrender a portion of your freedom to the government and you sign a contract, it governs the authority of the ruler, in whose hands should rest ultimate authority. So it seems to me that you surrender the part of your freedom to the government, then authority will rest within the government. So it says some 40 years later, Locke agreed with Hobbes that government must be formed by contract. So John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, they feel the government must be formed by a contract that laid the basis for social order and individual happiness. So I guess what he's saying is if you sign the contract with government, you have a right, you have I guess you're supposed to abide by the rules, which will be, make sure you're creating social order, and also that turns into individual happiness. So you sign a contract with the government. So that's just Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. The divergent positions of Hobbes and Locke proceeded from their contrasting perceptions of human nature. Whereas Locke described human beings as naturally equal, free, and capable of defining the common good. Hobbes viewed human beings as selfish, greedy, and warlike. I mean, some people may be like that, but not all people. So that's Thomas Hobbes. He viewed humans as selfish, greedy, and warlike. Without the state, he argued human life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes viewed human beings as selfish, greedy, and warlike. Ain't there something? Bound by an irrevocable and irreversible social contract. Government under one individual or ruling assembly was, according to Hobbes, society's only hope for peace and security. So they said they're bound by an irrevocable and irreversible social contract. So in other words, you sign a contract, can't be revoked, can't be reversed. So bound by an irrevocable and irreversible social contract, government under one individual or ruling assembly was, according to Hobbes, society's only hope for peace and security. So Thomas Hobbes felt that you sign a contract with the government and it will not be it's not reversible or irrevocable. And that would be, in other words, you'll be bound by that contract if you sign it. You bound by that contract to keep the peace. And I guess that at that time, I mean, that seemed like a good idea right now, because some people ain't trying to keep no peace, really. And some people don't keep no peace. But if they sign a contract, they will be bound by the contract. That's something, And it says the collective safety of society lay in its willingness to submit to a higher authority, which Hobbes dubbed the Leviathan, after the mythological marine monster described in the Bible. Hobbes aired these views in a treatise called the Leviathan, which he published in 1651, only 2 years after English anti-royalist forces had beheaded the English monarch, Charles I. They beheaded the English monarch, Charles I. Took his head off. That's terrible, man. That's terrible, really. That's Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. So you can do more research on them if you want to. It's up to you. So next one we have, I have some other ones on this page, but I'm just going to do a few of them. Okay, let's talk about another famous painter, Rembrandt. So Rembrandt, see what they said about Rembrandt. So this was a very interesting course when I took it, So let me see. Okay, here go Rembrandt. Rembrandt's portraits are studies of the inner life of his sitters. A keen observer of human nature and a master technician, Rembrandt became the leading portrait painter in the city of Amsterdam. The commissions he received at the beginning of his career exceeded his ability to fill them, but after a meteoric rise to fame as Rembrandt, remember the famous painter Rembrandt? Got Picasso, Michelangelo, Rembrandt, some different ones. His fortunes declined. Accumulated debts led to poverty, bankruptcy, and depression. The last compounded by the loss of his beloved wife in 1642. Rembrandt's self-portraits, over 60 of which survive, are a kind of visual diary, a lifetime record of the artist's passion and effort to document the inner life. His self-portrait in 1659, with his slackened facial muscles and worried brow, reveals a noble and yet vulnerable personality. Among the most lucrative of Rembrandt's commissions was the group portrait, a uniquely Dutch genre that commemorated the achievements of wealthy families, guild members, and militia officers. Some of these paintings, which measure more than 12 by 14 feet, reflect the Baroque taste for colossal proportion and theoretical setting. So this is a picture of Rembrandt right here. Yeah, Rembrandt right here. So that's Rembrandt right there. That's Rembrandt right there. Yep. So let's see, there's Rembrandt. Let's see who else we have. Okay, we have another gentleman, a Scottish philosopher, Adam Smith. So let's see. So Adam Smith. So So Adam Smith and the birth of economic theory. So Adam Smith, the Scottish philosopher Adam Smith, 1723, 1790, applied the idea of natural laws to the domains of human labor, productivity, and exchange of goods. In his epoch, making synthesis in ethics, economics, and inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. Published in 1776. Imagine that was what, 300 years ago? Smith set forth the laws of labor, production, and trade with an exhaustiveness reminiscent of Newton's Principia Mathematica. Okay, Smith contended that labor, a condition natural to humankind, as Locke had observed, was the foundation for prosperity. A nation's wealth is not its land or its money, says Smith, but its labor force. So this is Adam Smith. Since Smith contended that labor, a condition natural to mankind, was the foundation for prosperity. A nation's wealth is not the land or its money, says Smith, but its labor force. So a nation's wealth is the labor force. According to Adam Smith, it's the labor force, not its wealth or its money. It's the labor force. And that's Adam Smith. So it says, in the natural economic order, individual self-interest guides the progress of economic life, and certain natural forces such as the law of supply and demand. Yeah, I learned supply and demand in one of my courses. So we run a business. If there's a need for this particular product or service that the customers want or need, that if there's a demand for that, then the business should supply it. Supply and demand. Such as the law of supply and demand, motivate a market economy. So a market economy, you're advertising, promoting, marketing. You have your strategies in place. You're trying to outcompete the competitors. Everything. You try to build your brand. You try to find out where your target market is, and how can you get to them how can you locate your target market. So motivate a market economy. Marketing is everything about your brand, everything you do. Not just selling, but everything before you even sell that product, it's a whole lot of stuff you need to do. So all that to me comes under marketing. You have to get the product ready before you even sell it. You have to get it ready to market it out to your target market. Where is your target market? What marketing channels are you going to use? Are you using social media? Email marketing, text message marketing, social media. We don't do door-to-door no more, but, because too much going on. But so it says, since government interference would infringe on this order, reasoned Smith, such interference is undesirable. He thus opposed all artificial restraints on economic progress and all forms of government regulation and control. The modern concepts of free enterprise and laissez-faire economics spring from Smith's incisive formulations. In the following excerpt, Smith examines the origin of the division of labor among human beings and defends the natural and unimpeded operation of trade and competition among nations. So he felt there was competition among nations. The modern concept of free enterprise, laissez-faire, that means leave alone. In the following excerpt, Smith examines the origin of the division of labor The division of labor among human beings and defends the natural and unimpeded operation of trade and competition among nations. So the next, who do we have next? So let's talk about Rousseau. Let's talk about Rousseau. Let's see what Rousseau is doing. So Rousseau's revolt against reason. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, introduced in chapter 24. I introduced him earlier. But I think it's my first time talking about him, but I think I wrote his name down. Wrote some information about him previously. So Rousseau took issue with some of the basic precepts of Enlightenment thought, including the idea that the progress of the arts and sciences might improve human conduct. So he felt the art of the sciences might improve human conduct. Human beings may be good by nature, argued Rousseau, but they are ultimately corrupted by society and its institutions. And just something. Man meddles with them and they become evil. That's true. People get on your nerve, mess with you, and you turn evil. This is a human, or he said he was a playwright. It said a playwright, composer, and educator. He's a playwright, educator, and composer. Rousseau took issue with some of the basic precepts of Enlightenment thought, including the idea that the progress of the arts and the sciences might improve human conduct. So the art and the Enlightenment thought, it says, including the idea that the progress of the arts and sciences might improve human conduct. So he's trying to say that it might improve human conduct. I mean, he could be right. And some of these gentlemen and their views and their thoughts and their views are, important today. When you think about some of these things, like, really, that's still happening? It says, human beings may be good by nature. That's what Rousseau argued. Human beings may be good by nature. But in other words, you learn stuff along the way as you grow older. I mean, when you come up as a baby, you're good by nature, but as you get older, you start seeing other people do different things, and some people are like followers. They see other people doing stuff, and then they start doing it. But as you get older, you see things, you experience different things. You either turn one way or the other. You either turn good or bad. You lose all your morals and your ethics. And it says, human beings may be good by nature, argue Rousseau, but they are ultimately corrupted by society and its institutions. And I believe that's true. God makes all things good, wrote Rousseau. Man meddles with them and they become evil. Man meddles with them and they become evil. Man is very treacherous sometimes. Rousseau flatly rejected the artificiality of civilized life. And although he did not advocate that mankind should return to a state of nature, like on Walden Pond, which I'll be talking about shortly, he went back to nature. He wanted to see what he didn't want to learn. He didn't want to learn, but he wanted to see, I guess when he went back to nature, he wanted to see if he could not learn what was in front of him. It's hard not to do that, not to learn nothing. It's just like walking past somebody making a cake and you see all the ingredients out there. You walking past, you gonna learn. When you see those ingredients, you gonna be like, that's how she making that cake. She making that chocolate cake, that pound cake or whatever. But it says, Rousseau flatly rejected the artificiality of civilized life. And although he did not advocate that mankind should return to the state of nature, he exalted the noble savage as the model of the uncorrupted individual. Rousseau's philosophy of the heart elevated the role of instinct over reason and encouraged a new appreciation of nature and the natural. Principles that underlie the romantic movement of the early 19th century. In the following excerpt from Discourse on the Origin of Inequality Among Men, 1755, Rousseau gives an eloquent account of how, in his view, human beings came to lose their freedom and innocence. So that is Rousseau. Jacques Rousseau. So you can always read about Rousseau. You can always read more about him. So we talk about John Locke, Rousseau, Adam Smith. So now we have we talked about Sir Isaac Newton. I think I talked about him. Let's see, Sir Isaac Newton. Yeah, I talked about Newton. So we talked about Leonardo, Davinci, Michelangelo, John Locke, Sir Isaac Newton, Michelangelo. I got him twice. King James King James this one King James. This like King James the 14th. This King James version of the Holy Bible. Okay, that's why I didn't talk about that yet. And what else we talking about? We talking about John Sebastian Bach. Then I talk about Descartes. I don't think I would talk about him yet. Descartes. I got Descartes, Aristotle, King Louis XIV, Galileo, stuff the telescope. I'm just talking about Hobbes and Thomas Hobbes and John Locke and stuff like that. So we want. I just talked about Rembrandt. So let's talk about. I just talked about Rembrandt. So who's that? Oh, Rembrandt, Adam Smith, Rousseau. I just talked about him. Sir Isaac Newton. So Immanuel Kant. Let's talk about Immanuel Kant. You have Napoleon Bonaparte, and then the genius of Mozart. You have the genius of Mozart, Beethoven. So let's see what Immanuel Kant is talking about. Okay, Kant's mind world revolution. So I'm going to stand up a little bit. Stand up a little bit. Let me get a little drink real quick. Thirsty. So I love these right here. I keep the cold drinks cold. So this is one of the products that I'll be putting on my website. So these are nice. I also have some more that I ordered. I have different ones, but okay. So we're talking about Immanuel Kant. So let's talk about Immanuel Kant. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant. 1724, 1804. It says he was awakened from his slumber, as he put it, when he read the treatise of the Scottish philosopher David Hume. So David Hume also, 1711 to 1776. Hume had maintained that genuine knowledge was limited to two sorts: statements of logical relationships, bachelors are unmarried, and statements of sense perception. This chalk is yellow. Hume concluded that all other statements describe belief, not true knowledge. Provoked by the arguments of the gentle skeptic, as Hume was called, Kant rejected Hume's conclusion. offering his own analysis of the relationship between the perceiver and the perceived. Kant explained the mind not as a passive recipient of information, Locke's blank slate. So John Locke, remember I read that he said, did I go over John Locke yet? Well, John Locke, he's talking about how when we're first born, our mind is like a blank slate. In other words, as you grow older, you start having different experiences. You see other people doing things, you watch what other people do, experiences. So you feel that our mind is like a blank slate in the beginning when we first start coming up, growing up, from babies on up. It says, Kant explained the mind not as a passive recipient of information, but rather as a participant in the knowledge process. Kant explained the mind. So in other words, Kant was saying that your mind is like your mind. He described the mind as a participant in the knowledge process. Where John Locke said, your mind, when you start coming up, your mind is like a blank slate. So both of them sound pretty good. As a participant in the knowledge process. So I believe that sounds pretty good because, in other words, it's a process of knowledge, different knowledge that you learn along the way as you start from a baby and you grow up. Knowledge is learned. Experience is learned. So in other words, I couldn't learn a lot of knowledge that I learned if I wouldn't went to school. But in other words, sometimes you can obtain knowledge just by talking to somebody. Somebody that may have had a different experience with, something that you may not have had experience with, but, they may be, because if you're talking to somebody and they just explaining something, that's like gaining knowledge too. So in other words, John Locke said your mind, when you come up as a starting baby going up, first born, your mind is like a blank slate. And this is Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant said that in other words, your mind is like statements. Your mind is like a knowledge base. In other words, you're basically like a vessel for knowledge, gaining knowledge, different experiences as you get older. And it says, Kant explained the mind not as a passive recipient of information, not as a passive recipient of information. So the recipient is the person that receives information. So what he's saying is you are the participant in the knowledge process of gaining knowledge. So Kant put it, though our knowledge begins with experience, as I said, it does not follow that all knowledge arises out of experience. That's true. So in other words, you don't have to experience everything to gain that knowledge. Like I said, you don't have to experience it. Somebody else might have told it to you. But it's not that you might didn't experience it. You may not have experienced it on your own. So let's see, concepts such as time, space, causality are not, as Hume had it, mere habits of the mind, but the innate conditions of experience itself, the forms of intuition, space and time, and the categories of thought, quantity, quality, relationship, and modality exist in the mind from birth, as I was saying. They shape the data of the senses into a consistent picture of the world. So this is Immanuel Kant. It says concepts such as time, space, and causality are not mere habits of the mind, but innate conditions of experience itself. The forms of intuition, time and space, and the categories of thought, quantity, quality, relationship, and modality exist in the mind from birth. Kant's argument altered the relationship between mind and world as radically as copper. There's another gentleman too that I may talk about next time. Copernicus had changed the relationship between Earth and Sun. And so, who we have next? We have Napoleon Bonaparte, but I didn't write the page number. And we had a genius of Mozart. Okay, so let's see. Okay, let's skip on over to let's talk about let me see if they have the next one I have on the list is Picasso. Picasso was a famous painter as well. He was a famous painter, but I must have wrote down the wrong page. Wrote down the wrong page number for Picasso. I have to do that. Okay, so Thoureau, John Milton, Descartes. Okay, let's talk about Descartes, the father of modern philosophy. Descartes, that's 47. Okay, I thought I talked about Descartes. Oh, Descartes is the birth of modern philosophy. He was born in France. His name was René Descartes, 1596 to 1650. Regarded as the founder of modern Western philosophy and the father of analytic geometry. So this is a picture of him right here. That's Descartes. So, and he wrote his paper from Descartes' discourse on method. So sometimes you can look these gentlemen up. Adam Smith, John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Descartes, Socrates, Plato. So the next one is, let's see what we have. We also had Napoleon Bonaparte, King James the 14th. Okay, let's see. Let's see what goes on here. I talked about Immanuel Kant. We have Wolfgang Mozart. We have Wolfgang Mozart. 65. Beethoven, Mozart. So you can always read. It might be a different book. Okay, here, right here. Okay, we have Wolfgang Mozart, the genius of Mozart, the foremost musical genius of the 18th century, and for some critics of all time, was Haydn's younger contemporary and colleague, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, 1756 to 1791. A child prodigy, Mozart wrote his first original composition at the age of 6. What? Mozart. Well, Lord, he was doing that at the age of 6. So sometimes you start young, you practice. I wish I had been on my game when it comes to my music, at, younger age. But a child prodigy. Mozart wrote his first original composition at the age of 6. Mozart. They said he was something else. During his brief 35-year life, he died. He was 35 years old. During his brief 35-year life, he produced a total of 650 works, including 41 symphonies, 60 sonatas, 23 piano concertos, and 20 operas. Wow, that's something else. He started at the age of, good thing he started young. at the age of 6. And he only lived to be 35. I said these were cataloged and numbered in the late 19th century by Ludwig von Kochel. Hence the K numbers used to identify Mozart compositions. Sometimes I try to read so fast. I always was told that you read so fast, you can be real good. I started reading at a young age as well. Wolfgang, the son of a prominent composer, was born in Salzburg, Austria. With his father, he toured Europe, performing hundreds of public and private concerts before he was 13 years old. He often performed his own pieces, particularly his piano concertos, which constitute some of the most important contributions of his musical career. Unlike Haydn, Mozart did not invent any new forms. However, he brought to the instrumental genres of his time unparalleled melodic inventiveness. Okay, so that is the genius of Mozart. You can always look Mozart up. You have Mozart, you have Beethoven. So I don't think I have Beethoven. I think this is, I think I got one more. We have Constable and Turner. So let's talk about on Walden Pond. On Walden Pond. Okay, I got the wrong book, I guess. Let's see. Let's talk about on Walden Pond. I think this is the one. There you go. These books right here, they come with three same books. I think that's Plato. I think that's Plato right there. So he told me 3 books. So let's talk about the last one I have, Thoureau's Walden. From Thoureau's Walden, where Thoureau's Walden. Near the end of March 1845, I borrowed an axe and went down to the woods by Walden Pond. There is where I intended to build my house, and began to cut down some tall, arrowy white pines still in their youthful timber. It was a pleasant hillside where I worked. Covered the pine woods through which I looked out on the pond, and a small open field in the woods where pines and hickories were springing up. The ice in the pond was not yet dissolved, though there were some open spaces and it was all dark colored and saturated with water. There was some slight flurries of snow during the days that I worked there, but for the most part, when I came out on the railroad on my way home, its yellow sand heap stretched away, gleaming in a hazy atmosphere, and the rails shone in the spring sun, and I heard the lark and peewee and other birds already come to commence another year with us. They were pleasant spring days in which the winter of man's discontent was thawing as well as the earth, and the life that had lain torpid began to stretch itself. First he talked about how he went down to the woods and took an axe with him, because I guess he was going to cut down some trees, so not too far from where he lived, and he wanted to build a house. So that's why it says, one day when my axe had come off and I had cut a green hickory for a wedge, driving it with a stone, and had placed a hole to soak in a palm hole in order to swell the wood, I saw a striped snake run into the water. And he lay on the bottom, apparently without inconvenience, as long as I stayed there or more than a quarter of an hour, perhaps because he had not yet fairly come out of the torpid state. It appeared to me that for a like reason, men remain in their present low and primitive condition. But if they should feel the influence of springs arousing them, they would of necessity rise to a higher and more ethereal life. I had previously seen the snakes in frosty mornings in my path with portions of their bodies until bodies still numb and inflexible, waiting for the sun to thaw them out. On the first of April, it rained and melted the ice, and in the early part of the day, which was very foggy, I heard a stray goose groping about over the pond and crackling as if lost, or like the spirit of the fog. I went to the woods because I wish to live he said he went to the woods. I went to the woods because I wish to live deliberately to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die. Discovered that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it is quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. He wanted to live deep and suck all the marrow out of life. To live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest term. And if it proves to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world? It look like the police would have done a bright light. Or if it were sublimity, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. For most men, it appears to me, are the strange uncertainty about it, whether it is the devil or of God, and have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of man here to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I say, let your fans be as 2 or 3 and not 100 or 1,000. It says, or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen. And keep your counts on your thumbnail. Instead of 3 meals a day, if it be necessary, eat 1 meal. Instead of 3 meals a day, eat 1 meal. So he said a lot of, stuff. So where you stop at? Instead of 100 dishes, 5, and reduce other things in proportion. The indescribable innocence and the beneficence of nature, of sun, wind, and rain, of summer and winter, such health, such cheer, therefore forever. And such sympathy have they ever with our race, that all nature would be affected, and the sun's brightness fade, and the winds will sigh humanly, and the clouds rain tears, and the woods shed their leaves and put on mourning in midsummer. If any man should ever for a just cause grieve, shall I not have intelligence with the earth? Am I not partly leaves and vegetable mold myself? So in other words, he went down into the woods. He wanted to live, he said he wished to live deliberately to front all the essential facts of life and see if he could not learn what it had to teach. So in other words, when he died, he didn't want to feel that, he said he learned what it had to teach, and not when it came to die. So I guess he meant when he went down to the woods. In other words, but back then they didn't have no cell phones and nothing like that, so definitely not. But I guess when he went down to the woods back down to nature, I guess he was almost like leaving all the, I guess all the good things in life. You know what I'm saying? Leaving all the good things behind. You down there in the woods, you don't have nothing. You don't have, I mean, survival. You know, that reminds me of the Socrates. No, not Socrates, but Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, when he said only the fittest survive. Charles Darwin, when he said the theory of evolution. So in other words, if you know these different species that didn't have the proper, I guess I would say, build body wise. They didn't have the proper build body wise. They were not able to survive. Only the fittest would survive. So that was Charles Darwin. So and this right here is Thoureau. So he went down to the woods to confront all the essentials of life. In other words, you got your grass and your trees and everything he left back home, you know. So in other words, he wanted to see if he could learn. He could not learn. He said he wanted to see if he could not learn what the woods was going to teach him. In other words, he's down in the woods. He left everything back and he's just surviving off the grass, the trees, and the land. So it says, he said he went to the woods because he wished to live deliberately. So he went to the woods and wanted to live deliberately. So he living off the soil, living off the trees, living off the grass. Unless he took food with him, but it didn't say nothing about that. It said he went to the woods because he wished to live deliberately in front of only the essential facts of life to see if he could not learn what it had to teach, and not when he came to die. He could not learn what it had to teach. So to me, I feel, look like to me, when you went down into the woods, you were going to learn something. A lot of times you don't learn things deliberately, you just learn them. You can almost walk down the street and 9 times out of 10 you're going to learn something when you walk down the street. You might not learn it intentionally, but just walking from here to there is something that you're going to learn. You might see a different color bird or something, color that you have never seen before. So you learn that, you know. So I feel that you're going to learn something no matter where you go, whether it's deliberately or intentional, you're going to learn something. So he says, I went to the woods because I wish to live deliberately, to find only the essential facts of life. So essential facts of life, I mean, to me, the essential facts of life would be food, water. So that's, I guess, what you're talking about. The essential facts of life, not being here when you're on the cell phone, or you jumping in a swimming pool, you know, things that you do for enjoyment, excitement. So he's talking about the essential facts of life. Probably just food and water and shelter. I mean, I guess you wouldn't have no shelter down there unless you had a tent. So food and water, you know, that would be the essential facts of life. That's what he wanted to confront. He went down to the woods just to confront the essential facts of life. Food and water. Probably laid down on the ground. That's where he slept. So with no shelter down there, but food and water, those are essential facts. He said he wanted to see if he could not learn what it had to teach. And now when it came to die, discovered that he had not lived, and discovered that he had not lived. He said, I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. He did not wish to live what was not life. He didn't want to live what was not life. Living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep. He wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. He wanted to live deep down in the woods, deep down in nature, and he wanted to suck all the marrow out of life. So if he wanted to suck all the marrow, I'm trying to figure out, was he I guess he was trying to also see if he could survive. You down in the woods, can you survive down there? So, I mean, we had to eat, probably animals down there, insects or whatever, He says he wanted to live, and he wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner. He wanted to drive life into a corner. So to me, it seemed like he wanted to get close to death. Get close to death. You want to drive life into a corner, really? He wanted to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. I'm thinking that he wanted to get close to death as possible. He wanted to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meaning of it and publish its meaning to the world? So he wanted to drive life into a corner, reduce it to its lowest terms, and then publish it to the world. So that's what he did right here. Publish it right here. And if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meaning of it and publish its meanings to the world, or if it were subliminal, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. For most men, it appears to me, are in a strange uncertainty about it, whether it is of the devil or of God, and have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of man here to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. In other words, to me, it seemed like he wanted to back life up into a corner. In other words, if he died, then in other words, right here, it concluded, it says, whether it is of the devil or of God, and have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of man. The chief end of man. So he was talking about basically trying to get close to death as possible. That seemed like that's what I took out of the passage. And it concluded that it is the chief end of man here to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. To glorify God, simplicity. I say, let your affairs be as 2 or 3, and not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen, and keep your accounts on your thumbnail. Instead of 3 meals a day, if it be necessary, eat but one. Instead of 100 dishes, 5, and reduce other things in proportion. The indescribable innocence and beneficence of nature, of sun and wind and rain, and of summer and winter, such health, such cheer, they afford forever, and such sympathy have they ever with our race, that all nature would be affected, and the sun's brightness fade, and the winds would sigh humanly, and the clouds rain tears, and the woods shed their weak leaves, and put on mourning in midsummer. If any man should ever for a just cause grieve, shall I not have intelligence with the earth? Am I not partly leaves and vegetable mold myself? So to me it seems like in the beginning he's talking about, in other words, when he went down to the woods, he's talking about how he wanted to be, down there with nature. He wanted to be, in other words, he only wanted to confront the essential things in life, and I guess he wanted to confront the essential things in life. He wanted to back life into a corner. So to me, it seemed like he wanted to see how close to death he could come. He wanted to see how close to death he can come. In other words, and also he's saying at the end, instead of eating 3 meals a day, eat 1 meal a day. So I guess he's saying that it's not essential to eat 1 meal a day. The indescribable innocence and beneficence of nature, of sun and wind and rain, of summer and winter, such health, such cheer, therefore forever. So therefore forever, such sympathy have they ever with our race, that all nature would be affected, and the sun's brightness fade, and the winds will sigh humanly. So it's something, so that, but you can read that, and it's called from Thoreau's Walden. So that's when he went down to the woods, wanted to confront nature, wanted to reduce life to its lowest term. And essential things he wanted to, I guess he wanted to see how close to death he could come with just the essential things in life. So if you're down in the woods, there's nothing down there. Only thing gonna be down there is essential things, because you're not gonna have no refrigerator down there with all the food you want. You never had your cell. Well, back then they didn't have any cell phones, but now we do that, we're gonna be in trouble. So that is Thoreau's Walden. You can also read up on that. And then I'm not going to read too many more. We also have a gentleman called Walt Whitman's Romantic Individualism. Okay, Walt Whitman, he gave voice to the transcendental worldview in his euphoric poetry. He was a poet. So he served as a male nurse in an American Civil War hospital and wrote articles and poems that celebrated his love for the American landscape. So that is Walt Whitman's. That's Walt Whitman. So I think that's the last one. Okay, listen here. You go right here. So he was a poet, Walt Whitman. He was a poet. He look a little older, but I think that's the last one for the day, because I'm at 1:30. So some other gentlemen that I'll read about later. We have Hegel and Hegelian dialect. Okay, I think I'll read this last one, Darwin and the Theory of Evolution. Okay, it says, then we have Aristotle. I may talk about him next time. Darwin and his Theory of Evolution. Okay, it says, so it's a whole lot. Like Hegel, the British scientist Charles Darwin in 1809 1882 perceived nature as constantly changing. So Charles Darwin. Naturalist in the tradition of Aristotle, Darwin spent his early career amassing enormous amounts of biological and geological data, partly as a result of a 5-year trip to South America aboard the research vessel HMS Beagle, the HMS Beagle. So it's Charles Darwin. Darwin's study of fossils confirmed the view of his predecessor that all forms of life proceeded from earlier organic forms. The theory of evolution did not originate from Darwin. Goey, for example, had already suggested that all forms of plant life had evolved from a single primeval plant. And the French biologist, we didn't talk about him, we talked about this other guy, Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, 1744 to 1829, showed that fossils gave evidence of perpetual change in all species. Darwin, however, substantiated the theory of evolution by explaining the process by which evolution occurred, observing the tendency of organisms to increase rapidly over time and to preserve certain traits favorable to their survival. Darwin concluded that evolution operated by means of natural selection. By natural selection, Darwin meant the process whereby nature pruned away unfavorable traits in a given species, permitting the survival of those creatures most suited to the struggle for life and for the reproduction of their species. So in other words, theory of evolution. So certain species, if they were not properly developed, they wouldn't be able to live on. They would die off. And they wouldn't. So if they died off, they wouldn't be able to reproduce. They wouldn't be able to reproduce and reproduce, offspring, different species from them. So it says, the elephant's trunk, the giraffe's neck, and the human brain were evidence of adjustments made by each of these species to its environment and proof that any trait that remained advantageous to a species continuity will prevail in the species. Failure to develop such advantageous traits meant the ultimate extinction of less developed species and that only the fittest survived. Darwin published his classic work, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the less preservation of the favored races in the struggle of life. Less than a year later, a commentator observed, no scientific work that has been published within a century has excited so much general curiosity. So that is Charles Darwin. However, Darwin, substantiated the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution, where nature pruned away unfavorable traits in a given species. So nature pruned away unfavorable traits in a given set of species. So if they didn't have the proper traits to survive in the world, then they would die off. Say that the creatures most suited to the struggle for life and for reproduction. So if they weren't suited for being able to get out there and struggle in life and reproduce, then they would die off. Because you say, it's a struggle out there in life anyway. So you see how the lions and the tigers. Because I used to look at the program called the Geographic. I think it's called Geographic Channel, where you see the tigers. I guess the tigers and lions, how they out there, they're looking for, so they are definitely fit. They looking for somebody to attack and kill and eat, so survival of the fittest. Charles Darwin, you can also read more on Charles Darwin. So I think I'm going to close on this note. So these are some pretty good books though. So, they came with 3 of them. So I took the class, and when I took that class, I always had, when I took that class, the humanistic approach, we always had open book tests. But the open book test is, the teacher gets down in the chapter. So what they do, they get the teacher. A teacher usually get down in the chapter. So when they tell you that it's open book, that don't mean, So when they tell you it's going to be open book, the teacher tell you it's going to be open book, that don't mean, by no means, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. So I talked about Charles Darwin, theory of evolution, Thoureau, or Walden Pond, Immanuel Kant, Descartes, Socrates, Plato. So I'll talk about Socrates and Plato next time. So let's run down some of the names. Okay, I talked about Leonardo, Davinci, how he painted the Last Supper. Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Talked about John Locke, the English philosopher. He was an English philosopher and physician. Talked about Sir Isaac Newton. He was an English astronomer and mathematician. Talked about And talked about John Sebastian Bach. He was an organ master, choir director. Descartes, founder of modern philosophy, Western philosophy. Aristotle, I'll probably talk about him the next time. King Louis XIV, he governed France. Galileo, responsible for the telescope. Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. They took up the question of human rights versus the sovereignty of the ruler, which the ruler is the monarchy or the king. And then I talked about Jean-Baptiste. Well, I didn't talk about him. I talked about him the next time. Jean-Baptiste Poquelin. And then we talked about Rembrandt. Next time I'll talk about the Versailles property. Very beautiful, very beautiful. Then I had down here the Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence. So we'll talk about that next time. But Thomas Jefferson, he was the first one to sign the Declaration of Independence. And then also read up, I think it was in, I don't know who was in, no, it wasn't in one of my books. It was a coverage that I was watching on TV, how they were threatened, and some of them were killed because they were going to sign the Declaration of Independence. And back then, that was almost like it was against the law. A lot of people just didn't agree with that, so they were going to sign the Declaration of Independence. And some of them were killed. Some of the families were killed. They were threatened. So it was a coverage on TV. I forgot what program I was watching that day. But I was like, but you can also look up that online too. I didn't, I said, wow. Talked about Adam Smith, Scottish philosopher. He applied the idea of natural law to the domain of human labor, productivity, and exchange of goods. Then he also, some of them had different publications. And I didn't talk about Socrates and Plato, but maybe next time. Talked about Rousseau. Rousseau dealt with the revolt against the reason. Talked about Sir Isaac Newton, the famous mathematician. Immanuel Kant, Napoleon Bonaparte. I didn't talk about him. I'll talk about him the next time. We talked about the genius of Mozart, how Mozart started, I believe it was the age of 6. He started composing concertos and piano concertos by the age of 6, and then he died at 35. He only lived to be 35, so that was Mozart. Then we have a Picasso. I didn't talk about him, but maybe next time. Oh, Freud, the Freudian Revolution. So Freud, I didn't talk about him, maybe next time. Freud deals with subconscious and unconscious, not the unconscious, but the subconscious mind, how your dreams are suppressed and they come up to the surface. So he deals with the id, the ego, the superego. But I know that sometimes when I do dream, sometimes they seem real. I mean, they really seem real. I'm like, it seemed like they did come to the surface. But only when you wake up, you realize that was a dream. One time I dreamt that I had plenty of money. Oh boy, but when I woke up, I was like, oh man. Then John Milton, I didn't talk about him. Descartes, the founder of modern philosophy. Thoureau, I just talked about him on Walden Pond, how he went back. Thoureau, how he went down to, he wanted to get back to nature. He wanted to confront the essentials of life. And he wanted to drive life to a corner. He wanted to reduce life to its lowest terms. To me, that sounds like somebody that's trying to see how close to death he could come. That's what that sounds like. So you can read more up on Thoreau's Walden Pond, Kant's Immanuel Kant. I'll talk about him next time. German philosopher Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804. Wolfgang Mozart, Thoreau's on Walden Pond. So I think that was the last. And the next one I'll talk about, probably when I come back, the next video, Constable and Turner. That's dealing with the romantic landscape. Constable and Turner. There's a whole lot of other ones in that book, but I picked out the ones that I thought was, interesting. But I want to say thank you for joining me today. And so I didn't talk too much about business, because usually I talk about marketing, advertising, promoting, target markets, how you gonna reach your target market. But I wanted to just review some of the different gentlemen in that book, those books right there, because sometimes philosophers, some of their views are prevalent today, and some of their views are still recognized today, like Socrates and Plato, like Socrates said. And then the next video, I might want to do read some of their quotes. Because, Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. And, I want to bring up some different quotes from the different philosophers. That is very nice. I like some of them. Some of their quotes, when you think about it, that, still see them as true. So, marketing, advertising, promoting, target markets, competitive advantage. You want to outcompete your competitors. What about your marketing niche? What about total quality management that you try to implement throughout the organization? Continuous improvement. Try to build your brand. You want to build a stronger brand. Sometimes you might want to rebrand. Change your labels, logos, name. Change the products that you offer. It's just so many things when it comes to business that I can't talk about, but kind of tired, so I want to say thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you back on my next video. So comment below, subscribe below, so I can, get my subscribers up. But I'll see you on my next video. I don't know what I think I'll talk about those quotes on my next video, and then I might talk about some more gentlemen. But I'm going to go ahead and end it for the night, get in bed, and get rested. But I want to say thanks for joining me. Hope to see you next time. And subscribe below. Comment below, subscribe below, anything that you might want me to talk about. Anything pertaining to business, law, accounting, and, any of those gentlemen that I talked about, John Locke, who we talking about? We talking about John Locke, Adam Smith, Sir Isaac Newton, different ones. So I'll see you next time. I'll see you on my next video. So you all have a good one. Let go and unwind on Myrtle Beach time.